All right, everybody, get your engines fired up. It's time for Lights Out, Let's Chat.
Okay, Hungary just sent us into the summer break with drama, heartbreak, penalties, strategy, chaos, and finally a McLaren win. Lando Norris won the Hungarian Grand Prix. McLaren has its first Grand Prix victory of the 2026 season. Oscar Piastri looked like he might be the one to win it. Then contact with Carlos Sainz and a gearbox issue turned his race into heartbreak. Max Verstappen finished second and kept pressure on McLaren all afternoon. Kimi Antonelli recovered from a grid penalty and still finished on the podium. Lewis Hamilton had a strong weekend on paper, but a pit lane speeding penalty and Ferrari strategy frustration dropped him to fifth. Charles Leclerc finished fourth after Ferrari looked like the team to beat on Friday. George Russell's start basically went absolutely not, and he dropped almost to the back before recovering to seventh. Cadillac had another rough day with both cars retiring. And because Formula One never lets us relax, we also got major calendar news. Malaysia is coming back to the F1 calendar, but in the weirdest way possible, hosting the Bahrain Grand Prix at Sepang. So yes, there is a lot to talk about. Hey everyone, welcome back to Lights Out, Let's Chat, the Formula One podcast where we make F1 a little less intimidating, a lot more fun, and hopefully easier to follow. If you are newer to the sport, I'm Michaela, and today we are breaking down the 2026 Hungarian Grand Prix. This race was the final race before the summer break, which means everyone now has a few weeks to overthink everything. McLaren finally won, Ferrari is frustrated, Mercedes still has the championship leader on the podium. Red Bull is not winning, but Max Verstappen is still right there. Piastri had one of those races where you just sit there and stare at the screen like, that can't be how that ends. Hamilton is probably wondering how a weekend that started so promising ended with him behind his teammate. And F1 fans now have a whole summer break to argue about McLaren team management, blue flags, Sainz and Piastri, Ferrari strategy, Hamilton's penalty, and whether Norris just changed the tone of McLaren's season. Today, we're going through practices, qualifying, the grid penalties, the race, the McLaren teammate battle, Piastri's heartbreak, Norris win, Verstappen's pressure, Antonelli's podium, Ferrari's complicated day, the DNFs, the penalties, the biggest drama, the Malaysia news, and our question of the week. And as always, if you are new to F1, you are not expected to know every weird rule, every penalty document, every tire strategy, or why everyone is yelling about a white line during a virtual safety car. I'll explain it. So, let's get into Hungary. Before we talk about the weekend, we need to talk about the track because Hungary is not like Spa. Spa is long, fast, dramatic, and open. The Hungarian track is tight, twisty, technical, and really difficult to overtake on. People often call it Monaco without the walls, and that is not perfect, but it gives you the right idea. It is not a track where you can just blast past someone easily every lap. You need rhythm, you need tire management, you need track position, you need clean air. And if you get stuck behind another car, it can completely ruin your strategy. For my beginners, clean air means you are driving with no car directly in front of you. Dirty air means you are following another car and the air is coming off that car, makes your own car lose grip. So, when Norris was saying he had pace but was stuck in dirty air behind Piastri, that matters. He might have been faster, but being faster is not always enough if the track is hard to pass on. That is one of the biggest reasons this race became so tense, because McLaren had two drivers at the front, but they were not just fighting other teams. They were also trying to manage each other, and that is where it got spicy. Friday started with Ferrari looking like the team to beat. Charles Leclerc set the fastest lap in FP1. Lewis Hamilton was close behind. Ferrari looked comfortable on both medium and soft tires, and the car seemed to work immediately. That mattered because Ferrari had shown real flashes recently. Hamilton won in Barcelona, Leclerc won at Silverstone, Ferrari had pace at Spa. So, when Hungary started with Ferrari on top, it was easy to think, okay, maybe Ferrari is about to go into summer break on a high. Kimi Antonelli was also among the front runners again, showing Mercedes still had pace even around a tight circuit. McLaren looked competitive, but they were not chasing the headline lap time in the same way. Norris and Piastri were focused more on race setup and longer runs, and that is important. Practice is not always about being fast. Sometimes it is about learning, it's about tire life, sometimes it's about trying parts, and sometimes it is about gathering data for Sunday. For my newer followers, a long run means the team sends the driver out for several laps in a row to understand how the car behaves over a race stint. One fast lap tells you something. A long run tells you whether the tires survive, whether the car balance stays stable, and whether the race pace is actually good. So FP1 told us Ferrari had a strong one-lap pace, Mercedes was still there, and McLaren was quietly preparing for the race. No major crashes, no red flags, just a lot of setup work and a lot of people wondering if Ferrari was about to have a big weekend. Then FP2 happened and Ferrari stayed on top. Lewis Hamilton topped the session, Charles Leclerc finished second, a Ferrari won too. That is exactly what Ferrari wanted heading into the rest of the weekend. Verstappen was close behind in third, which showed Red Bull had improved from FP1 and was not going anywhere. Antonelli continued to show pace for Mercedes. McLaren still focused heavily on race simulations, with Norris showing promising speed and Piastri having a more difficult day after missing FP1. That is another important detail. Piastri had to get comfortable quickly because he did not have the same full FP1 preparation. On a track like Hungary, where rhythm matters so much that it can make a difference. There was still no major crashes or red flags in FP2, but the drivers were locking up at turn 1 and turn 12 as the grip changed throughout the session. The track was tricky, the balance was hard to nail, and teams were managing heat, tire wear, and cooling demands. So Friday's headline was clear. Ferrari had the speed, but McLaren's race pace was lurking. And sometimes the car that looks fastest on Friday is not the car that wins Sunday. Just ask Ferrari fans. They know too well. Saturday morning changed the tone. Lando Norris topped FP3 with a 117.939. Hamilton was second, just over a tenth behind. Antonelli was third, only 0.129 off Norris. Leclerc was fourth, Piastri fifth, Russell sixth, Verstappen seventh. That is a tight front group. And now McLaren looked like a real pole contender. Norris looked sharp. Piastri also had pace, even if his weekend had been a little more complicated because of the early missed running. But FP3 also had a red flag. Sergio Perez brought out the stoppage after smoke poured from the brakes on his Cadillac. It was not a crash, but the car had to be recovered, and it interrupted several qualifying style runs. That ended up being a warning sign for Cadillac, because brake problems would come back on Sunday. Aston Martin struggled despite upgrades, with Alonso and Stroll near the bottom. Williams also looked off the pace. Arvid Lindblad had limited running after an engine change, which hurt his qualifying preparation. So, going into qualifying, the front looked extremely close. McLaren had a slight edge, Ferrari still right there. Antonelli and Mercedes were firmly in the fight. Verstappen was competitive, but not quite at the top. And Hungary was setting up to be one of those qualifying sessions where one tiny mistake could change everything. And it did. Qualifying was one of the tightest sessions of the season. Lando Norris took pole with a 1:17.207. Lewis Hamilton was second on the road, only 0.012 seconds behind. That is basically the blink of an eye. Charles Leclerc qualified third, Kimi Antonelli fourth, Oscar Piastri fifth, Max Verstappen sixth, George Russell seventh, Isaac Hadjar eighth, Evan Lindblad ninth, Nico Hulkenberg 10th. So McLaren finally had pole. And that mattered because this was McLaren's first pole of the 2026 season. Mercedes had been dominating qualifying across the season, so Norris ending that run was a big deal. But then the penalties came. Hamilton received a 3-place grid penalty for impeding Oscar Piastri in Q3. Antonelli also received a 3-place grid penalty for failing to slow under yellow flags after Verstappen spun. So the official top 10 grid became Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, Kimi Antonelli, Isaac Hadjar, Arvid Lindblad, Nico Hulkenberg, and Perez started from the pit lane after Cadillac made setup. So, qualifying gave us drama before the race even started. Norris had pole, Hamilton lost the front row, Piastri was angry because his Q3 lap was ruined, Antonelli got dropped down the grid, Verstappen's spin created yellow flags, Russell had a water leak issue, and suddenly the front of the grid looked very different. Let's talk about Hamilton's qualifying penalty because this one matters. He was second fastest. He missed pole by 0.012 seconds. That is painfully close. But he was penalized for impeding Piastri in Q3 after slowing on the racing line and forcing Piastri to abandon his lap. The pro penalty side is simple. If a driver is on a fast lap and another car blocks them, that could ruin their entire qualifying. At Hungary, where overtaking is difficult, grid position matters a lot. Piastri had a real chance to improve, and Hamilton's positioning affected that. So the penalty makes sense. The con side is that traffic situations in qualifying can get messy. Drivers are managing tire temps, battery deployment, gaps, team instructions, and track position. Sometimes the driver may not realize how quick another car is arriving, but still, the responsibility is on the driver and the team to avoid impeding. My take, I think the penalty was fair. And I hate that for Hamilton because I low-key don't like him because he was so close to pole, but Piastri lap mattered too. If you block someone in qualifying, especially on a track like Hungary, there has to be consequences. This is one of those moments and still agree with the penalty. Now, Antonelli, he qualified fourth but was dropped 3 places for failing to slow significantly under yellow flags caused by Verstappen's spin in Q3. The pro side, yellow flags exist for safety. If there is a car spun or stopped, drivers have to slow. It does not matter if it ruins your lap. It does not matter if it is qualifying. It does not matter if you are the championship leader. Safety comes first. The con side, the frustrating part is that yellow flag situations can be difficult to judge from inside the car. Drivers are moving extremely fast. They rely on signals, dash lights, marshals, and team communication. Sometimes they lift, but the stewards decide it was not enough. So it can feel a bit harsh. My take, I am okay with this penalty. I know I have called out the FIA before when I think context matters, like with a broken car track limits. But yellow flags are different. If there is danger on the track, the standard has to be strict. You cannot play around with that. So yes, it hurt Antonelli's race, but I understand why it was enforced. At lights out, Norris got away cleanly from pole, but Piastri was right there. Piastri got a run, went after Norris into turn 2, and took the lead with a cut back move. That was a huge moment. McLaren had both cars at the front, but now Piastri was leading, and this is where the race became a McLaren strategy headache. because Norris believed he was faster. He said he was in dirty air, he wanted to be released. Piastri was leading the race. McLaren had to decide how much to manage their drivers and how much to let them fight. For my beginners, when teammates are running first and second, the team has to be careful. If they let them race too hard, they risk both cars. If they control them too much, one driver feels like the team is favoriting the other. This is where F1 gets political, because the drivers are teammates, but they are also rivals. And at McLaren, Norris and Piastri both believed they could win. That is exciting and also stressful. This is probably one of the biggest debates of the race. Norris was saying he was faster behind Piastri. McLaren did not immediately move Piastri aside. The pro side of swapping, if Norris was clearly faster, swapping the cars would have protected the team result. Let the faster driver go, build the gap, and avoid losing time to Max Verstappen, Ferrari, or Kimi Antonelli. At a track where dirty air hurts, letting the faster car sit behind the slower car can cost both drivers. The con of swapping. Piastri had earned the lead on track. He made the move. He was the race leader. You cannot just tell a driver who fairly passed his teammate, "Sorry, please move over," because he says he is faster. That destroys trust in the team. And if Norris does not pull away after the swap, then the team looks ridiculous. My take, I understand why McLaren did not immediately swap them. Piastri earned the lead, but I also think McLaren has to get better at making these decisions quickly. This is not just about being fair, it is about winning. If one driver is clearly faster and stuck in dirty air, you need a plan. Not panic, not favoritism, a plan. The good news for McLaren is that Norris won anyway. The bad news is that this could have gotten really ugly if Verstappen had been closer or if Piastri had not retired. So my take is McLaren survived the teammate management drama this time. But this is not the last time this issue shows up. Not even close. While McLaren was fighting at the front, George Russell had an awful start. His anti-stall kicked in and he dropped from 6th all the way down near the back. At one point, he was as low as 21st. For my beginners, an anti-stall is a system that stops the car from fully stalling when the engine revs drop too low. It is helpful because it can keep the car alive. If it triggers at the start, it destroys your launch. It is like trying to sprint and tripping over your own shoes. Russell recovered to finish 7th, which is honestly impressive, but the damage was done. On a weekend where Antonelli finished on the podium, Russell losing so much ground at the start hurt. He still got points, but it was not the race he needed before summer break. Hamilton was the first to pit, swapping softs to hard. Verstappen responded soon after. And then Verstappen got Hamilton into turn 1. That move mattered because Hamilton had been pressing Verstappen earlier, but the pit sequence flipped the fight. Verstappen was not fully happy with Hamilton's defending and said over the radio, "It was nice action, but not right." This was not a penalty headline, but it was one of those little moments that social media loves. Max unhappy, Lewis involved, Hungary, close racing. Everyone instantly becomes a lawyer. Pro and con. Was it hard racing or too much? The pro, Hamilton's side is that defending is part of racing. You are allowed to make life difficult. You do not just open the door and say, "Please, after you, sir." The pro, Verstappen side is that defending has limits. If a driver moves late or squeezes too much, the attacking driver will feel like it crossed a line. My take, this felt like hard racing more than a scandal. Max was annoyed. That's normal. Lewis was defending. That is also normal. The move eventually happened. No major penalty drama followed, so I am not turning this into a war. But I do love that even in 2026, a Hamilton Verstappen moment still makes everyone sit up straight. Some storylines never die. Now we need to talk about the moment that completely changed the race. Piastri was still in the fight, but things were starting to shift towards Norris. Then Piastri encountered Carlos Sainz while blue flags were in play. At the exit of turn 2, they made contact. Piastri was furious on the radio. The stewards investigated the incident. Sainz later received a 5-second penalty for contact. And this moment became one of the biggest turning points of the race, because after that, Norris had the clean air and the pace build enough of a gap to pit and rejoin ahead. For my beginners, blue flags are shown to slower cars when the leaders are coming through to lap them. The slower car has to let the faster car by safely. But this can still get messy, especially on a tight track. The leader does not want to lose time. The lap driver still has to place the car safely. And if they misjudged it, contact can happen. That is what made this incident so costly. Piastri was trying to fight for the win. Sainz was not in that fight, and the contract hurt Piastri's race. This is one of those emotional F1 moments. Piastri fans are going to say he was taken out by a back marker. And I get why. The pro Piastri side, Piastri was fighting for the win. Sainz was being lapped. Blue flags were involved. The contact cost Piastri momentum, time, and possibly contributed to his race slipping away. Then later, the gearbox issue ended his day completely. So emotionally, this feels brutal. Now, the con is that lapping cars is part of racing. Back markers do not disappear. They still have to drive their race. Sometimes the leader also has to choose where and how to pass. And while Sainz received the penalty, that does not automatically mean he intentionally ruined Piastri's race. My take, I feel awful for Piastri. This one hurts as a McLaren fan. He led the race. He beat Norris on track at the start. He had a real chance to win. And then contact with a lapped car became the turning point before the gearbox finished the job. Was Sainz penalized? Yes. Was Piastri right to be furious? Yes. But I would be careful with the phrase taken out, because Piastri did not retire immediately from the contact. The race unraveled in stages. Contact, lost time, Norris gains control, then gearbox failure. So my take is Sainz deserved the penalty. Piastri deserved better. Once Norris got clean air, the race flipped. He was fast, like really fast. This was probably some of the best race pace he has shown all season. After his second stop, he had enough time in hand to rejoin ahead of Piastri. Then Piastri's gearbox problem brought out the virtual safety car. Norris pitted again and still kept the lead. From there, he controlled the final laps. He finished around 15 seconds ahead of Verstappen. That is not sneaking a win. That is taking it. And this was his first Grand Prix victory of the 2026 season. It was McLaren's first win of the season, and it was also his first Grand Prix win as a reigning world champion. That matters emotionally, because when you are carrying the number one, everyone expects you to prove it. And for much of the season, McLaren has been close but not quite there. Good pace, good points, good recoveries, but not wins. Hungary finally changed that. McLaren finally won. So now we have to ask, are they back? The pro side. Yes, they are back because they had pole. They had both cars at the front. Norris had excellent race pace. The upgrades appeared to work. And they beat Verstappen, Ferrari, and Mercedes on a track where track position and tire management mattered. That is real. The con is that the race was not clean. Piastri retired. The team had internal management questions. Norris had to fight through dirty air frustrated. And we still need to see if McLaren can repeat this after the summer break. One win is great. A championship challenge requires consistency. My take, McLaren is finally back in the conversation, but I am not fully relaxed yet. As a McLaren fan, I want to scream, celebrate, and immediately pretend we are winning every race now. But no, we are being adults, mostly. Hungary was a huge step. Norris looked incredible. The car looked beautiful to drive, but McLaren still has to clean up the teammate management and reliability side. Because if Piastri had finished second, this would feel like a perfect McLaren weekend. Instead, it feels like a win wrapped in a heartbreak. Very on brand for Formula One. Let's give Piastri his own section because this was brutal. He started third, he passed Leclerc, he passed Norris, he led the race. He looked calm, he looked like he could win. Then the Saints contact shifted the race towards Norris. Then the gearbox problem ended it. He retired with around 15 laps left. That is heartbreaking. And for McLaren, it is painful because this could have been a 1-2. Instead, one car wins and the other is parked. Piastri has every right to be frustrated, especially because he did so much right. This was not a race where he was invisible. He was one of the main characters, and sometimes being one of the main characters means the plot hurts your feelings. Because the VSC mattered, let's explain it. A virtual safety car is basically F1 saying, everyone slow down, but we are not bringing out the full safety car. It happens when there is danger on track, like a stopped car, but race control does not need the whole field bunched behind a physical safety car. Every driver has to slow to a controlled pace. Now, here's why teams care. When everyone is driving slower, a pit stop can cost less time compared to normal racing speed. So if you pit under VSC, you might lose less time than you would under green flag conditions. That is why VSC timing can completely change a race. In Hungary, Piastri's stoppage triggered the VSC, and several drivers took the chance to pit. Norris stayed ahead. Hamilton looked like he had come out ahead of Antonelli, but replays showed Antonelli reached the relevant VSC white line before Hamilton. So Hamilton gave the position back. For my beginners, there are timing lines on the track that decides who was ahead at the exact moment that matters. Even if it looks close, the line decides it. So Antonelli got the position, Hamilton had to give it back, and then Hamilton's pit lane speeding penalty made his race even worse. Hamilton finished fifth. This was a very complicated fifth. He started fifth after the qualifying penalty. He was aggressive early. He fought Verstappen. He was in the mix for a podium. Ferrari went with a three-stop strategy. Then the VSC sequence created confusion. Hamilton had given the position back to Antonelli based on the VSC line. Then he received a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. That penalty dropped him behind Leclerc in the final classification. So, a weekend that started with Hamilton nearly on pole and Ferrari looking strong ended with Hamilton fifth and frustrated. He also questioned Ferrari's strategy during the VSC situation, and I honestly understand why. Ferrari looked like the team to beat on Friday. They had Hamilton 0.012 off pole in qualifying. They had Leclerc on the front row after penalties, and they finished fourth and fifth. That is not awful, but it is not what Ferrari wanted. Let's ask the spicy question. Did Ferrari blow this race? The pro yes side. Ferrari looked fantastic on Friday. Hamilton was nearly on pole. Leclerc started second. The team had track position, and they ended up fourth and fifth. Hamilton was unhappy with timing and strategy. The pit lane speeding penalty also hurt. So, if you're a Ferrari fan, this feels like another missed opportunity. The not entirely side. The con is that McLaren's race pace was real. Norris was flying in clean air. Piastri was strong before the problem. Verstappen was quick enough to finish second. Antonelli recovered well. So, Ferrari did not simply throw away an easy win. They were beaten by a very fast McLaren and strong Verstappen. My take, Ferrari did not completely blow it, but they absolutely left Hungary with less than they should have. That is the Ferrari pain. They were not terrible, but they were also not sharp enough. And in a season this close, being not terrible is not enough. Hamilton's penalty is on Hamilton. The strategy questions are on Ferrari. The overall result is just frustrating. This team has race winning pace sometimes, but they still do not feel clean enough every weekend. And if they want to fight for more than emotional wins, that has to change. Max Verstappen finished second, and this was actually a very strong result. The Red Bull did not look like the fastest car all weekend. He qualified sixth before penalties moved him up. He dealt with car complications during the race, including damping and shifting frustrations, but he still finished second. That is what Max does. Even when Red Bull is not dominant, he finds a way to be there. He pressured Norris, but he could not get close enough to challenge for the win. At the Hungarian circuit, it is hard to overtake. Norris had the pace, and once McLaren had control, Verstappen had to settle for second. But for Red Bull, this is still valuable. After weeks of questions about whether they were recovering, Verstappen scoring 18 points mattered. Kimi Antonelli finished third. This was quietly a big championship result. He started lower than he qualified because of the grid penalty. He had to manage traffic, he was warned about track limits, he questioned a late pit call, but he still finished on the podium. This is how championships are built, not just wins. On a weekend where Russell had a terrible start and only recovered to 7th, Antonelli extended his advantage heading into the summer break. Pros and cons. Is Antonelli too conservative or just smart? The pro side is that he is mature. He does not always need to force the spectacular move. He collects points, he stays in the championship fight. The con is that sometimes Mercedes' strategy and Antonelli's race choices can look cautious when fans want fireworks. My take, Antonelli is driving like someone who understands the championship. Not every weekend has to be dramatic. Sometimes third is exactly what you need. And after the ups and downs of Silverstone and Spa, getting the summer break with a bigger lead is huge. He is still the driver everyone is chasing. And that is wild for a rookie. Isaac Hadjar finished 6th for Red Bull. Again, super impressive. He has become one of the drivers I keep watching because he keeps popping up in important places. George Russell recovered to 7th after the anti-stall nightmare. Liam Lawson finished 8th. Nico Hulkenberg 9th. Arvid Lindblad 10th. That gave Racing Bulls another double points result with Larson and Lindblad both scoring. And Hulkenberg kept Audi in the points. Balletto just missed out in 11th. The midfield story matters because these are the teams fighting for every point. When a top team finishes 8th, it can feel disappointing. When a midfield finishes 8th, it can be a fantastic Sunday. This is why newer fans should watch more than the podium, because the championship is not just about who wins. It is also about who keeps grabbing points when chaos opens the door. Let's organize the retirements clearly. The 3 official retirements were Oscar Piastri, Sergio Perez, Valtteri Bottas. Piastri retired after an apparent gearbox problem following earlier contact with Carlos Sainz. Bottas retired after reporting smoke in the cockpit, with Cadillac confirming suspect overheating brakes. Perez retired later with an issue at the front left of his car, was due to investigate the exact reason after the race. So McLaren lost a possible podium or win with Piastri. Cadillac lost both cars, and that is a rough way to go into the summer break, especially for Cadillac because reliability issues are starting to feel like a major storyline for them. Let's go through the penalty list clearly. Hamilton received a 5-second penalty for pit lane speeding. That dropped him behind Leclerc in the final result. Sainz received a 5-second penalty for the incident with Piastri. Behrman received a 5-second penalty for ignoring blue flags. Hamilton had already received a 3-place grid penalty after qualifying for impeding Piastri. Antonelli had already received a 3-place grid penalty after qualifying for failing to slow significantly under yellow flags. Perez started from the pit lane after Cadillac's made setup changes. And Piastri/Sainz was the major race incident investigation that mattered most for the win fight. That is a lot. Hungary was not just a race, it was a race plus a legal department. Now we need to talk about the big calendar news. Malaysia is coming back to Formula One, but not exactly as the Malaysian Grand Prix. Formula One and the FIA confirmed that international circuit in Malaysia will host the Formula One Gulf Air Bahrain Grand Prix from October 2nd to October 4th, 2026. Yes, the Bahrain Grand Prix in Malaysia. Formula One is so weird. The event is still subject to final agreements and official sign-off, including approval of the World Motorsport Council. But the headline is huge. Sir Pring is back on the circuit for the first time since 2017. For my beginners, sometimes calendar changes happen because of safety, logistics, politics, weather, construction, or other major issues. When a race cannot happen where originally planned, F1 can try to relocate or replace it. In this case, the Bahrain Grand Prix is being hosted in Malaysia. So, the name is Bahrain, the location Malaysia. Confusing? Yes. Interesting? Yes. The pro is that the circuit is a fantastic circuit. A lot of fans have missed it. It has long straights, big braking zones, fast corners, heat, humidity, and often weather chaos. It could be an amazing race. It also makes logistical sense because it sits between Baku and Singapore on the calendar. And bringing Malaysia back gives Asian fans another major F1 moment. The con is that calling it the Bahrain Grand Prix in Malaysia is confusing. New fans are going to be like, wait, why is Bahrain in Malaysia? And honestly, fair question. It also raises bigger questions about how F1 handles calendar issues, regional politics, and event identity. A Grand Prix name matters. A host country matters. And this is going to be weird to explain on graphics, standing pages, and casual conversations. My take, I am excited for Malaysia. I am confused by the naming. Both things are true. If we get the circuit back, I am happy. The track deserves to be on the calendar. But calling it the Bahrain Grand Prix in Malaysia sounds like Formula One spilled the calendar on the floor and taped it back together. I get why it's happening. But for new fans, this is going to need a very clear explanation. So, my official stance is that Malaysia returning, yes, please. Bahrain Grand Prix in Malaysia, my brain just needs a minute. My biggest takeaway from Hungary is that McLaren finally got the win, but they did not get the perfect weekend. Norris was brilliant, Piastri was heartbreaking, Verstappen was steady, Antonelli was smart, Ferrari was frustrating, Russell recovered, Hadjar impressed, Racing Bulls scored, Cadillac suffered, and the summer break now has enough drama to keep everyone talking. This race is exactly why Formula One is not just about who has the fastest car. It is about the track position, strategy, tire life, traffic, blue flags, penalties, teammate politics, reliability, and sometimes just surviving the chaos better than anyone else. Norris earned this win. McLaren needed this win. As a McLaren fan, I needed the win. But Piastri deserved more from this race. And Ferrari probably needs to sit in a room during summer break and ask why a weekend that started so strong ended with 4th and 5th. As for Antonelli, he goes into break still looking like the championship favorite. Not because he wins every week, but because even when he does not win, he still finds the podium. That is how you build a championship. That is it for this week's episode of Lights Out, Let's Chat. We covered the Hungarian Grand Prix, Norris' first win of the 2026 season, Piastri's heartbreak, McLaren team tension, Verstappen's second place, Antonelli's podium, Ferrari's strategies frustration, Hamilton's penalty, the DNFs, the post-race penalties, and the Malaysia calendar news. Make sure you answer the question of the week. Did McLaren handle the Norris and Piastri fight correctly, or should they have stepped in earlier? Leave me your answer in the comments or send us a message. And if you are enjoying the podcast, please follow, subscribe, leave a review, share it with a friend, or send it to someone who wants to understand Formula One without being yelled at by gatekeepers. Formula One now heads into the summer break, and the next race is the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort from August 21st through August 23rd. I will be back next week to go over the previous races, and then I might be taking my summer break as well. Until next time, lights out, let's chat.
From lights out to the checkered flag, this has been Lights Out, Let's Chat podcast. We'll see you next time.